Blocko 1. The marble floors of the north wing gleamed under the afternoon light, cold and unforgiving beneath my knees. I'd been scrubbing the same section for what felt like hours, my fingers raw from the lye soap, the acrid smell burning the inside of my nose. The castle was preparing for the autumn gathering, an event where allied pacts would converge to renew treaties, arrange marriages, and parade their daughters before King Demon like prized cattle. I was invisible during these preparations. Just another pale-haired servant girl in a gray uniform, hands chapped and red, eyes downcast. That's how I preferred it. Invisibility was safety in a court where predators wore crowns, and cruelty was mistaken for strength. "Move faster, girl," Margot hissed as she passed, her arms laden with fresh linens. "The king's chambers need to be perfect before the delegations arrive. If there's a single speck of dust, it'll be your hide." I nodded without looking up, dragging my bucket toward the next section of floor. Margot had never been kind, but lately her contempt had sharpened into something almost personal. Perhaps she sensed what I'd been trying to hide. The nausea that rolled through me each morning. The way my uniform had begun to strain across my middle despite my best efforts to conceal it. 3 months. That's how long it had been since that night. I pressed my palm against my stomach as another wave of sickness threatened. Not here. Not now. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, focusing on the rhythmic motion of the scrub brush against stone. In and out. In and out. The pattern was meditative, almost peaceful, until the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall slammed open. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the corridor. King Demon strode into the north wing, flanked by his sentinels, beta wolves who served as his personal guard. Even from 30 feet away, I could feel the weight of his presence, the raw dominance that made the air itself feel thicker. He was dressed in black from collar to boot, his dark hair slightly disheveled as though he'd just come from the training grounds. There was blood on his knuckles. "Don't look up," I told myself. "Don't draw attention." But my body betrayed me. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain every wolf in the corridor could hear it. The scrub brush slipped from my fingers, clattering against the bucket with a sound that might as well have been a bell. The king stopped walking. "Everyone out," he said, his voice low and absolute, "except you." I didn't need to look up to know he meant me. The other servants scattered like leaves before a storm, their footsteps quick and grateful. Even Margot disappeared without a backward glance. Within seconds, the massive corridor was empty, save for the two of us and his sentinels, who remained posted at the doors like statues. I stayed on my knees, staring at the soapy water in my bucket, as though it held the secrets of the universe. My reflection wavered there, a ghost of a girl with wheat-colored hair falling loose from her braid, gray eyes too large for her thin face. "Stand up," Demon commanded. My legs shook as I obeyed, water dripping from my hands onto the pristine floor I'd just cleaned. I kept my gaze fixed somewhere around his chest, unable, unwilling to meet his eyes. The last time I'd looked into those amber depths, I'd forgotten how to breathe. He moved closer, each footstep deliberate and measured. I could smell him now. Pine and smoke and something darker. Something wild that called to a part of me I'd spent 3 months trying to smother. When he stopped, he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Look at me, Ilara." The use of my name startled me more than any command could have. In 4 years of service, he'd never spoken it. I'd been girl, or you, or simply invisible. Hearing my name in his mouth felt intimate and terrifying in equal measure. Slowly, I raised my eyes. He was watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle, his expression unreadable. There was a fresh cut along his jaw, probably from sparring, and dirt beneath his fingernails. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were burning, searching, stripping away every defense I'd carefully constructed. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm just a servant, Your Majesty. I go where I'm assigned. Don't lie to me." His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more dangerous. "You requested transfer to the south wing. You take meals in the kitchen instead of the servants' hall. You disappear into the laundry rooms during evening duties." He tilted his head slightly. "You've been avoiding me very deliberately." My throat was too tight to respond. How did he know these things? Why had he been paying attention? Are you afraid of me? He asked, and something flickered in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. I'm afraid of what you represent, I whispered before I could stop myself. The honesty hung between us like a living thing. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might order me to the dungeons. Kings didn't tolerate insolence, and Demon had a reputation for being merciless with those who challenged him. But instead, he did something unexpected. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement as though I were a wild animal he didn't want to startle, and caught a strand of my hair between his fingers. The gesture was so tender it made my chest ache. You've been sick, he said, his voice dropping even lower. The kitchen staff gossiped about it. Said you've been refusing breakfast, that you look pale. His thumb brushed against my cheek, and I realized with horror that I was trembling. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm imagining things, and I'll walk away right now. I wanted to lie. God, how I wanted to lie. But my body was already betraying me. The slight swell of my stomach, the way my scent had changed, the exhaustion that clung to me like a second skin. Wolves could sense these things, and Demon wasn't just any wolf. He was an alpha king, his instincts honed by centuries of bloodline selection. My voice cracked. I didn't mean for this to happen. The confession fell out of me like a stone down a well. The silence that followed felt infinite, stretching between heartbeats until I thought I might shatter from the weight of it. Demon's hand dropped from my face. He took a step back, and I watched emotions war across his features. Shock, disbelief, and something else I couldn't name. When he spoke again, his voice was rough, almost broken. You're carrying my child. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway, wrapping my arms around myself as though I could physically hold the pieces together. I know what this means, I said quickly, desperate to fill the horrible silence. I know I'm nobody, just a servant, a human. I don't expect anything from you. I'll leave the castle. I'll go somewhere far away where no one knows me. You'll never have to... Stop talking. The command cracked through the air like a whip. I flinched, biting down hard on my lower lip to keep it from trembling. This was it. This was where he would exile me. Or worse. Kings had done worse for lesser scandals. But when I dared to look at him again, he wasn't looking at me with disgust or anger. His eyes were fixed on my stomach, where my hands had instinctively moved to protect the small life growing there. His expression was something between reverence and raw terror. That night, he said slowly, as if testing the words, after the winter solstice ceremony. You were in the library. I thought you were... He shook his head. I thought I was alone. The memory crashed over me with brutal clarity. I'd been returning books to the shelves, working late because the head housekeeper had demanded the castle be spotless before the new year. He'd entered the library like a storm, angry, grieving, his control hanging by a thread. His brother had died that morning in a border skirmish. I'd seen the news spread through the servants' quarters like wildfire. I should have left, should have made myself invisible. But he'd looked so devastated, so utterly alone despite his power, that I'd made a fatal mistake. I'd asked if he was all right, and somehow, in the dark quiet of that library, with snow falling past the windows and grief thick enough to choke on, we'd reached for each other, two lonely souls seeking comfort in the most primal way possible. It had been gentle and desperate, and achingly brief. Afterward, he'd left without a word, and I'd convinced myself it meant nothing, that I meant nothing. I remember, I whispered. Demon moved closer again, and this time when he reached for me, his hand settled over mine where it rested on my stomach. His palm was warm, calloused from sword work, large enough to span my entire abdomen. The touch was possessive and protective in equal measure. How far along? He asked. 3 months. Maybe a little more. He exhaled slowly, and I felt the tension in him shift into something harder, more resolved. When he looked at me again, there was steel in his gaze, the kind of determination that had won him battles and united territories. You're not leaving, he said flatly. You're not going anywhere. Your Majesty, I can't possibly... That's my child. His voice was absolute, brooking no argument. Mine. Do you understand what that means? You're carrying the heir to the northern kingdoms, the first royal offspring in 20 years. His hand tightened fractionally over mine. You think I would let you disappear? Let my child grow up as a bastard in some forgotten village? People will talk, I said desperately. The court will never accept. I don't care what they accept. Something fierce blazed in his expression, something that made him look more wolf than man. That's my baby inside you, Alara. Mine, and I protect what's mine. The words should have sounded possessive, maybe even threatening. But underneath the dominance, I heard something else. A promise. A vow. He was claiming me, claiming our child, in the way wolves had been claiming mates for millennia. But I'm human, I whispered, the old fear clawing its way up my throat. I'm nobody. A servant girl with no family, no status. No. You're the mother of my child. He cut me off, his thumb stroking slowly across my knuckles. That makes you everything. The corridor swam in my vision, overwhelmed by too many emotions to name. Fear, relief, disbelief, and underneath it all, a tiny, fragile spark of something that felt dangerously like hope. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed from the eastern corridor. Demon's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid with protective instinct. Within seconds, one of his sentinels appeared. A broad-shouldered beta named Owen, his expression carefully neutral. Your Majesty, the Silverwood delegation has arrived early. Chancellor Voss is requesting your presence in the throne room. I felt Demon's frustration roll off him in waves. He didn't look away from me as he responded. Tell Voss I'll be there shortly, my lord. He insists. Shortly. The word was edged with enough command that Owen bowed immediately and retreated. When we were alone again, Demon stepped closer, crowding into my space in a way that should have felt threatening, but instead felt protective. He lowered his voice, speaking quickly and urgently. Tonight, after the welcoming feast, come to my private chambers, not the formal ones. The rooms in the East Tower. There's a servant's entrance through the old stone passage. Do you know it? I nodded mutely. Come alone. Tell no one. We need to talk about this properly without an audience. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Can you do that? Yes, I breathed. Good. He held my gaze for a moment longer, and I saw the conflict raging behind his eyes. Duty versus desire, protocol versus instinct. Then he did something that stole the breath from my lungs. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine, just for a second. A gesture of intimacy that wolves reserved for pack. When he pulled away, his expression had shuddered back into the mask of the Alpha King. Go rest, he ordered, his voice returning to its formal cadence. And eat something. You look like you haven't slept in days. Then he was striding away, his sentinels falling into formation around him, leaving me alone in the gleaming corridor with my bucket of dirty water, and my world turned completely upside down. I sank back to my knees, not trusting my legs to hold me, and pressed both hands to my stomach. Beneath my palms, barely perceptible, I could feel the faintest flutter, like butterfly wings, or hope, or the beginning of something that would change everything. The servants' quarters buzzed with frantic energy as evening descended. I moved through the chaos like a ghost, pulling on my cleanest gray dress, the one without visible stains or frayed hems, and attempting to tame my hair into something resembling respectability. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Alara, where have you been? Margot appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with exertion. We're short-handed in the Great Hall. The Silverwood pack brought twice as many attendants as expected, and Cook is threatening to quit if someone doesn't help plate the venison. I'll be right there, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She narrowed her eyes, studying me with the kind of scrutiny that made my skin crawl. You look strange. Are you sick again? Just tired. Well, push through it. Tonight's feast is critical. The king needs to make a strong impression on the visiting alphas, especially with rumors circulating about weakness in the eastern borders. She sniffed dismissively, though I can't imagine why he'd care what those Silverwood mutts think. Their territory is barely larger than a county. I nodded absently, waiting for her to leave. When she finally did, I pressed my palm against my stomach, feeling the gentle swell beneath the fabric. "That's my baby inside you." Demon's words echoed through my mind, equal parts terrifying and electrifying. The great hall was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Long tables stretched the length of the cavernous room, laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, autumn vegetables glazed in honey, and flagons of dark wine. Chandeliers blazed overhead, their light reflecting off the polished weapons mounted on the walls, a reminder that this court was built on conquest and maintained through strength. I took my position along the wall with the other serving staff, trying to make myself small and unremarkable. From here, I had a clear view of the high table where Demon sat surrounded by visiting dignitaries. He looked every inch the monarch tonight, dressed in deep burgundy and black, a circlet of silver resting on his dark hair, his posture radiating authority. But I noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against the arm of his chair when he thought no one was watching. To his right sat Alpha Garrett of the Silverwood Pack, a barrel-chested man with graying temples and calculating eyes. His daughter, Celeste, occupied the seat of honor beside Demon, a position typically reserved for potential brides. She was beautiful in the way powerful wolves often were, tall, dark-haired, with sharp features and confidence that bordered on arrogance. Her crimson dress was cut to display her figure, and she leaned toward Demon whenever she spoke, her laughter bright and practiced. Something cold and ugly twisted in my chest. "That one's been circling for months," whispered Petra, another servant girl who'd positioned herself beside me. She was younger than me, barely 19, with kind eyes and a tendency to gossip. "My cousin works in the council chambers. She says Alpha Garrett's been pushing for a marriage alliance. The Silverwood Pack has access to the southern trade routes, and their warriors are legendary. The king doesn't seem interested," I observed, watching as Demon barely acknowledged Celeste's attempts at conversation. "Doesn't matter what he wants, does it? Kings marry for strategy, not preference." Petra sighed dramatically. "Still, I feel a bit sorry for her. Imagine throwing yourself at a man who looks at you like you're a piece of furniture." I said nothing, but my heart was hammering. The reality of the situation crashed over me with brutal clarity. I was a human servant carrying a king's child, and somewhere in this very room sat a woman who was everything I wasn't. Powerful, connected, wolf-born. A proper match. The feast progressed with speeches and toasts. I moved mechanically through my duties, refilling wine goblets and clearing plates, keeping my eyes downcast, but I felt Demon's gaze on me more than once, tracking my movements across the hall like a predator following prey. It was near the end of the meal when everything went wrong. I was reaching across a table to collect empty plates, when a wave of dizziness hit me so suddenly I had to grip the edge for support. The room tilted sickeningly, and my vision swam with dark spots. I tried to breathe through it, to force my body into submission, but the nausea was relentless. "Are you all right?" someone asked, one of the Silverwood attendants, her voice distant and tinny. "Fine," I managed, but my legs were trembling. "Just need a moment." I didn't make it 2 steps before my knees buckled. Strong hands caught me before I hit the floor, and I found myself staring up into concerned gray eyes. Owen, one of Demon's sentinels, had somehow crossed the room in seconds. "Easy," he murmured, his voice low enough that nearby conversations continued undisturbed. "When's the last time you ate?" I couldn't remember. Breakfast had been impossible, and I'd been too nervous about tonight to attempt lunch. "I'm fine," I repeated, trying to pull away. "Please, I just need to—" "You need to sit down before you faint." His grip was gentle but immovable. He guided me toward a side door, away from the main crowd. "Come on. There's a bench in the corridor." I was too weak to argue. Owen deposited me on a stone bench just outside the great hall, then crouched down to my level, studying me with unsettling intensity. He was younger than most of Demon's sentinels, maybe late 20s, with wheat-colored hair and a scar running through his left eyebrow. "You're the girl from the North Wing," he said slowly. "This afternoon, the king spoke with you." My heart stopped. "I don't know what you—" I was standing guard. I might not have heard the words, but I saw his face. Owen's expression softened slightly. "I've served King Demon for 6 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." panic clawed at my throat. Please don't. I'm not going to say anything. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. But you should know that others will start noticing. The king's not exactly subtle when something matters to him. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Whatever's happening between you two, it's dangerous. For both of you. The court is full of people who would use any scandal to undermine his authority. There's nothing happening, I said weakly. Owen gave me a look that said he didn't believe me for a second. If you need help, and I think you will, find me. I'm loyal to the king, which means I'm loyal to anyone he cares about. He stood, glancing back toward the great hall. Can you make it back to your quarters? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then go. Rest. And for the God's sake, eat something. He disappeared back into the feast, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I didn't return to the celebration. Instead, I made my way through the castle's warren of passages, taking the servants' routes to avoid the main corridors. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, heavy and uncooperative. By the time I reached my tiny room, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but I couldn't sleep. I sat on my narrow bed, watching the candle on my nightstand burn lower, counting down the minutes until I was supposed to meet Demon. Every sound in the corridor made me jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. What was I doing? What did I possibly think could come from this? The memory of his hand on my stomach, the fierce protectiveness in his voice, warred with the image of Celeste leaning close to him. Beautiful and appropriate, and everything a queen should be. I was fooling myself if I thought this could end any way but badly. The candle had burned down to a stub when I finally forced myself to stand. The castle was quiet now, the feast having ended hours ago. I pulled a dark cloak over my dress and slipped into the corridor, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would wake everyone. The old stone passage Owen had mentioned was hidden behind a tapestry near the eastern tower. I'd only discovered it months ago while searching for a lost cleaning rag. The tunnel was narrow and dark, smelling of earth and age, with rough walls that scraped my shoulders as I navigated by touch alone. When I emerged, I found myself in a small antechamber I didn't recognize. A single lantern burned on a side table, casting dancing shadows across stone walls. A heavy wooden door stood before me, slightly ajar. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to run, but beneath the fear was something stronger. A pull I couldn't name, a desperate need to understand what this meant, what he wanted, what future could possibly exist for us. I pushed the door open. The room beyond was nothing like the formal royal chambers. It was smaller, warmer, clearly lived in rather than just occupied. Books were stacked on every available surface. A fire crackled in a large stone hearth. The furniture was worn but comfortable. A couch covered in furs, a heavy desk littered with papers and maps, shelves filled with an eclectic collection of objects that suggested a life beyond ceremony and duty. Demon stood by the window, his back to me, still dressed in his formal attire, though he'd removed the circlet and unbuttoned his collar. He turned when I entered, and the raw emotion on his face made my breath catch. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice, as though he genuinely feared I wouldn't. "You commanded it," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't why I was here. "I've commanded many things that people ignore." He moved toward me slowly, giving me time to retreat if I wanted. "Close the door." I obeyed, my hand trembling on the heavy wood. The click of the latch felt final, like sealing us both inside a decision neither of us could take back. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Owen told me you nearly fainted during the feast." Of course Owen had told him. "I'm fine, just tired." "Don't lie to me, Alara." He was close enough now that I could see the worry etched into his features. "Not about this. Not about your health or the baby's health." The word baby hung between us, making everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. I wrapped my arms around myself, a poor shield against the intensity of his gaze. "I don't understand what you want from me," I whispered. "You said I'm not leaving, that you protect what's yours, but what does that actually mean? I saw you tonight at the feast. I saw her. That Alpha's daughter, sitting where a queen should sit. Something dangerous flickered across Demon's face. Celeste Silverwood means nothing to me. She's a political consideration, nothing more. A political consideration that everyone expects you to marry. I don't give a damn what everyone expects. He reached for me, his hands settling on my shoulders with surprising gentleness. Look at me. Please. I forced myself to meet his eyes, those burning amber depths that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever constructed. I have spent 10 years doing what was expected, he said, his voice low and intense. I became king at 23 when my father died. I've fought wars, made alliances, sacrificed my own wants for the good of the kingdom. I've been responsible, dutiful, exactly what a ruler should be. His thumb traced along my collarbone, sending shivers down my spine. But that night in the library, for the first time in a decade, I felt like myself again. Not a king, not a symbol, just a man. One night doesn't mean it meant everything. He cut me off, his grip tightening fractionally. Do you know how many women have thrown themselves at me? How many calculated seductions I've endured from Alpha's daughters looking to secure their bloodlines? They see a crown, a title, a means to power. His forehead dropped to rest against mine, and I felt him shudder. But you looked at me and asked if I was all right. No one ever asks if I'm all right. Tears burned behind my eyes. I'm still just a servant, human, powerless. Carrying your child doesn't change what I am. It changes everything. He pulled back enough to look at me, and there was steel beneath the vulnerability now. That child is mine. You are mine. And I will burn this entire kingdom down before I let anyone take either of you from me. The possessiveness should have frightened me. Instead, it kindled something warm and dangerous in my chest. The first fragile tendril of belonging I'd felt in 4 years of invisible servitude. The court will never accept it, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Then the court will learn to adapt. Demon's hand moved to cup my face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. I'm not asking for your permission, Alara. I'm telling you how this is going to be. You will move into rooms near mine. You will be protected, provided for, treated with the respect owed to the mother of the heir. Anyone who speaks against you will answer to me. And what about love? The question escaped before I could stop it, small and broken. What about choice? His expression softened, and for a moment he looked almost vulnerable. I can't promise you love, not yet. I barely know you beyond one night and a few stolen glances across corridors. He traced the line of my jaw with infinite care. But I can promise you honesty, protection. A chance for us to discover what this could become without the weight of shame or secrecy. He paused, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. And if I'm being honest, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night. That has to mean something. It meant everything, and nothing all at once. But standing here in his private sanctuary, feeling the warmth of his touch and the fierce determination radiating from him, I couldn't quite hold on to my fear. Okay, I whispered. Okay? I'll stay. We'll try. The relief that flooded his features was stunning in its intensity. He pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me with a desperation that spoke of loneliness and longing and 1,000 unspoken needs. I let myself sink into the embrace, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. For the first time in 3 months, I felt almost safe. Rest here tonight, he murmured into my hair. The couch is comfortable. I'll take the chair. Tomorrow we'll make arrangements for your new quarters. I should have argued, should have insisted on returning to the servants' wing. But exhaustion and emotion had wrung me dry. When Demon guided me to the couch and draped a fur blanket over me, I didn't resist. I watched through heavy-lidded eyes as he settled into the chair by the fire, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that should have been unsettling but instead felt like protection. Demon? I whispered into the darkness. Yes? Thank you. For not hating me. The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might not answer. Then, I could never hate you, Alara. That's what terrifies me most. I fell asleep to the sound of the fire crackling, and the knowledge that everything had changed, and there was no going back to the girl I'd been just 12 hours ago. Morning arrived with pale sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the events of yesterday crashed over me like a wave. I sat up quickly, the fur blanket falling away, and found the room empty except for me. A note lay on the small table beside the couch, written in bold, angular handwriting. Had to meet with the council at dawn. Breakfast is covered on the desk. Eat all of it. Owen will escort you to your new quarters at mid-morning. Don't argue with him. He's under strict orders. I touched the paper, tracing the single initial as though it could tell me secrets. Then I noticed the tray on the desk. Fresh bread still warm from the ovens, soft cheese, sliced apples, a pot of herbal tea that smelled of mint and honey. My stomach growled traitorously. I was halfway through the meal when a soft knock sounded at the door. Owen entered without waiting for permission, his expression carefully neutral. "Good morning," he said, taking in the scene with a single efficient glance. "I trust you slept well?" "Well enough." I set down the bread, suddenly self-conscious. "The king said you'd escort me to your new rooms." "Yes, they're in the West Tower. Private, comfortable, with a view of the gardens." He paused, studying me with those two perceptive gray eyes. "The king has also assigned 2 handmaids to assist you, women he trusts. They've been briefed on the situation." Heat flooded my cheeks. "How many people know?" "Currently, 3. Me, the king, and Lady Iris, his late mother's closest friend. She's the one who selected your handmaids." Owen's expression softened slightly. "The king is being careful. He wants to control how this information spreads, rather than letting court gossip dictate the narrative." "And when will he tell everyone?" I asked, dreading the answer. "That depends on several factors: the visiting delegations, the political climate, your health." He gestured toward the door. "But right now, let's focus on getting you settled. The king was very specific about wanting you comfortable and safe." The walk through the castle was surreal. Owen guided me through passages I'd cleaned 100 times, but never truly seen. Marble archways carved with wolves and ancient symbols, tapestries depicting legendary battles, windows that offered breathtaking views of the kingdom stretching endlessly in all directions. We avoided the main corridors, taking routes that kept us away from prying eyes. The West Tower rooms were nothing like the cramped servants' quarters I'd occupied for 4 years. The main chamber was spacious and bright, with tall windows overlooking gardens that blazed with autumn colors. A large bed dominated one wall, covered in soft linens and pillows. There was a writing desk, comfortable chairs, a wardrobe that looked hand-carved, and a private bathing room with a copper tub that made my chest ache with longing. 2 women waited inside, one middle-aged with kind eyes and graying blonde hair, the other younger, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp features and an assessing gaze. "This is Helena," Owen said, indicating the older woman, "and Mara. They'll be attending to your needs." He addressed them directly. "The king has made his expectations clear. She is to be protected, respected, and cared for as though she were already royal. Is that understood?" Both women bowed their heads. "Yes, Sentinel," they said in unison. Owen turned back to me, his expression gentling. "If you need anything at all, send word through Helena or Mara. I'll check on you this evening." He hesitated, then added quietly, "You're not alone in this, Alara. Remember that." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with 2 strangers who knew my deepest secret. The silence stretched awkwardly until Helena stepped forward with a warm smile. "You must be overwhelmed, dear. Why don't we start with something simple? A proper bath, perhaps? You look like you haven't had a moment's rest in weeks." The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. I nodded mutely, and within minutes I was sinking into hot water scented with lavender, feeling tension I'd carried for months beginning to dissolve. Helena moved around the bathing room with practiced efficiency, laying out clean clothes, simple but well-made dresses in soft fabrics, while Mara unpacked supplies I hadn't known were coming. "The king sent for these this morning," Mara said, holding up various items. "Herbal teas for nausea, salves for dry skin, books he thought you might enjoy." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "He was quite specific about your comfort." "He shouldn't have," I began. "He's the king," Helena interrupted gently. "He does what he wishes, and right now, he wishes to care for you and the babe you carry." She knelt beside the tub, her expression earnest. I served his mother, Queen Adrian, through 2 pregnancies. I know something of what you're facing, the fear, the uncertainty. But you should also know that King Demon is his mother's son. When he commits to something, to someone, he is absolute in his devotion, even to a human servant, I whispered. Especially then. Mara's voice was dry but not unkind. The king has never been one to care much for convention. It's part of what makes him a good ruler. He sees value where others see only hierarchy. I wanted to believe them, wanted to trust that this wasn't some elaborate dream I'd wake from to find myself back in the servants' quarters with chapped hands and an uncertain future. But hope felt dangerous, like setting myself up for a fall that would shatter me completely. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of small adjustments, learning the layout of my new rooms, meeting the kitchen staff who would bring my meals, understanding the protocols for moving through the castle, now that my status had shifted into something undefined and precarious. Helena and Mara were patient teachers, answering my questions without judgment, treating me with a respect I'd never experienced before. It was early afternoon when a sharp knock interrupted the calm. Mara answered the door and returned looking troubled. Lady Iris requests an audience, she said carefully. She's waiting in the sitting room. My stomach dropped. Lady Iris was a legend in the castle. Queen Adrian's dearest friend, advisor to 3 generations of royalty, and rumored to be the most politically savvy person in the kingdom. If she wanted to see me, it couldn't be good. I found her standing by the window, a tall woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She was dressed in deep green silk, every inch the noble woman. And when she turned to face me, her expression was unreadable. "So you're the girl who's turned my godson's world upside down," she said without preamble. I curtsied awkwardly, unsure of the proper protocol. "My lady." "Oh, stop that." She waved away the formality. "Sit down before you fall down. You look terrified." I perched on the edge of a chair, my hands twisted in my lap. Lady Iris studied me with the intensity of someone conducting an interrogation, taking in every detail from my pale hair to my worn hands to the slight swell of my stomach I'd been trying to hide. "How far along?" she asked bluntly. 3 months, maybe slightly more. "And you're certain it's his?" The question should have offended me, but I heard only pragmatism in her tone. "There's been no one else, ever." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite approval, but perhaps a reduction in suspicion. Demon came to me this morning, told me everything, asked me to help manage the situation. She moved to sit across from me, her posture regal even in a simple chair. "I won't lie to you, girl. This is a disaster from a political standpoint. The king taking a human lover, producing a bastard heir, it gives his enemies ammunition and his allies cause for concern." Each word landed like a stone, confirming my worst fears. "I never meant. I don't care what you meant." Her voice was sharp, but not cruel. "What matters is how we move forward. The king is determined to keep you and the child. He's made that abundantly clear, so the question becomes, how do we transform this scandal into something the court can accept?" "Is that even possible?" I asked, my voice small. Lady Iris leaned back, considering. Demon's mother, Adrian, was not high-born. "Did you know that? She was the daughter of a minor noble from a forgotten territory. When the old king chose her as his mate, the court was scandalized, but Adrian was clever. She made herself indispensable, not through manipulation, but through genuine care for the kingdom and its people. By the time she died, she was beloved." "I'm not a noblewoman," I said. "I'm not even wolf-born." "No, but you carry the king's child. That gives you value, whether you like it or not." She stood, moving to the window again. "Here's what will happen. We're going to educate you. History, politics, etiquette, everything you need to know to survive in this court. Helena and Mara will help. I will personally oversee your transformation." "Transformation?" The word felt ominous. From servant to something more. "We can't make you a wolf, but we can make you formidable." She glanced back at me, and for the first time, I saw something almost like sympathy in her eyes. "The court is full of predators, child. They will try to destroy you the moment your existence becomes known. Your only chance is to become strong enough that they fear the consequences of attacking you. The weight of her words pressed down on me like a physical thing. What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? Then you'll fail, and your child will grow up with a target on their back. Lady Iris's voice was matter of fact. But I don't think you'll fail. Do you know how I know? I shook my head mutely. Because you're still here. You could have run when you discovered the pregnancy. You could have disappeared, tried to hide. Instead, you stayed. You faced the king. You accepted his protection even knowing it would paint a target on you. She turned fully to face me. That takes a kind of courage most people never find. We just need to sharpen it into something that can cut. A knock at the door interrupted us. Owen entered, his expression grave. Lady Iris, the king requests your presence in the council chambers. Immediately. What's happened? She asked, already moving toward the door. The Silverwood delegation, Alpha Garrett, is demanding a private audience. He's threatening to withdraw his support for the Eastern Border Treaties if the king doesn't agree to discuss the marriage alliance. Owen's eyes flicked to me briefly. It's urgent. Lady Iris cursed under her breath, a shocking sound from someone so refined. She paused at the door, looking back at me. Stay in these rooms. Don't go wandering. And start reading. She gestured to the books Demon had sent. Knowledge is armor. You're going to need every piece you can find. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with Helena, Mara, and the sudden realization that political forces were already moving, tides I didn't understand threatening to pull me under. Come, Helena said gently, guiding me toward the comfortable chairs by the fire. Let's have some tea. You've had enough shocks for one day. But as I sat there, staring into the flames, I couldn't shake the image of Celeste Silverwood sitting beside Demon at the feast. Beautiful, appropriate, powerful, everything I wasn't. And now her father was demanding an audience, pushing for a marriage that would solve all of Demon's political problems, everything except the fact that I was carrying his child. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling the gentle swell beneath my palm. I won't let them take you, I thought fiercely. I won't let them make you disappear like you don't matter. It was the first time I'd thought of the baby as a person rather than a problem. The first time I'd felt something beyond fear, a fierce, protective love that surprised me with its intensity. Outside the window, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, dark and threatening. I watched them roll closer, wondering if they were an omen of what was coming. Helena handed me a cup of tea, her expression knowing. Storms always pass, dear. The question is whether we're strong enough to weather them. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and made a silent vow. I would be strong enough. I had to be. Because I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. 3 weeks passed in a strange, suspended reality. I barely left my tower rooms, spending my days with Helena and Mara, learning things I'd never imagined needing to know. The genealogies of major wolf packs, the intricate dance of court politics, proper speech patterns that marked education rather than servitude. Lady Iris visited daily, her lessons sharp and unforgiving, pushing me until my head ached with names and alliances and the subtle meanings behind seemingly innocent phrases. When Duchess Marina asks about your family, she's really asking if you have connections worth respecting, Lady Iris explained one afternoon, pacing before the fire like a general planning battle. When Lord Thaddeus comments on the weather, he's testing whether you understand the agricultural concerns affecting the Northern Territories. Every conversation is a test, and you cannot afford to fail. My hand cramped from taking notes, but I didn't complain. Beyond these walls, I knew storms were brewing. Owen brought news when he could. Always careful, always brief. Alpha Garrett hadn't left the castle despite repeated hints that his visit should conclude. Celeste Silverwood had been seen walking the gardens with Demon twice, their conversations lasting long enough to fuel speculation. The council was growing restless, demanding the king settle his succession plans. And I remained hidden, a secret growing heavier with each passing day. I saw Demon only in stolen moments. Late at night when the castle slept, he would slip into my rooms through a servant's passage I'd been shown. We didn't speak much during those visits. He would hold me, his hand resting protectively over my stomach, his face buried in my hair, as though drawing strength from my presence. Sometimes he fell asleep in the chair by my bed, exhausted from days of political maneuvering. I would watch him in the firelight, memorizing the lines of his face, wondering how long this fragile peace could last. It lasted exactly 23 days. I woke to the sound of shouting in the corridors. Unusual in the normally controlled castle environment, Helena burst into my room, her face pale with urgency. "Get dressed. Quickly. Something's happened." My heart seized. "What? Is it the king?" "He's fine, but..." She thrust clothes at me, her hands shaking. "Just hurry. Lady Iris is on her way." I dressed with trembling fingers, my mind conjuring 1,000 disasters. When Lady Iris arrived moments later, her expression was grimmer than I'd ever seen it. "There's been an incident at the morning meal," she said without preamble. "One of the Silverwood attendants, a young woman named Clara, accused you of using dark magic to seduce the king." The words didn't make sense at first. "What? I've never even met her. I haven't left these rooms." "The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that she made the accusation publicly, in front of half the court and all the visiting dignitaries." Lady Iris's jaw tightened. "She claimed to have seen you sneaking through the castle at night, heard whispers of unnatural influence. It's all lies, of course, likely fed to her by someone who wants to undermine the king's authority. But the damage is done. What will happen to me?" The question came out small and terrified. "That depends on the king. He's demanded a formal court assembly this afternoon. He's going to address the accusations directly." Lady Iris moved closer, gripping my shoulders with surprising strength. "Listen to me carefully. This was always going to happen, the revelation of your existence, the challenge to the king's choices. We'd hoped for more time, but we work with what we have. The king is going to claim you publicly. He's going to make his intentions clear." My legs nearly gave out. "In front of everyone?" "In front of everyone," she confirmed. "And you need to be ready. You need to walk into that throne room with your head high, showing no fear, no shame. Do you understand? Any weakness they see, they will exploit." I thought of all those lessons, all those hours learning to speak and move and present myself as something more than a servant. It had seemed almost like a game then, an abstract preparation for some distant future. Now that future had arrived with brutal suddenness, and I felt utterly unprepared. "I can't do this," I whispered. "You can and you will." Lady Iris's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Because the alternative is losing everything. Your child's legitimacy, the king's protection, possibly your life. There are people in that court who would happily see you executed if they thought it would serve their purposes." Helena appeared with a dress I'd never seen before, deep blue silk that shimmered like water, cut to flatter but not reveal, speaking of quiet dignity rather than ostentation. As they dressed me, arranged my hair, applied subtle cosmetics to make me look less terrified, I felt like I was preparing for my own funeral. The walk to the throne room was endless. Owen and another sentinel flanked me, their presence both protective and intimidating. Courtiers lined the corridors, their whispers rising like a wave as I passed. I kept my eyes forward, channeling every lesson Lady Iris had drilled into me about posture and presence. "You are not a servant anymore," I told myself with each step. "You are the mother of the heir. Act like it." The throne room doors stood open, revealing a space packed with nobility, warriors, visiting dignitaries, everyone who mattered in the kingdom and beyond. My entrance caused an immediate hush, hundreds of eyes turning to assess, to judge, to find me wanting. Demon sat on the throne at the far end of the room, looking every inch the Alpha King in formal regalia. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely controlled fury simmering beneath his composed exterior. When his eyes found mine, something flickered there, relief, pride, and a fierce protectiveness that warmed me from the inside out. Owen guided me to a position near the throne, but not presumptuous. Careful staging that acknowledged my importance without overstepping invisible boundaries. I could feel the weight of all those stares, hear the whispered speculation rippling through the crowd. Silence. Demon's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell instantly quiet. "We are here to address accusations that have been made. Cowardly, baseless accusations designed to sow discord and undermine this court's stability." A young woman near the front, Clara, I assumed, flinched, but didn't speak. Beside her, Alpha Garrett's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the calculation in his eyes. "Ilara," Demon said, and hearing my name from his lips in this public setting sent shivers down my spine. "Step forward." My legs moved automatically, carrying me closer to the throne. The silence was suffocating. Demon stood, descending the steps until we were level. He reached for my hand, and I gave it to him, feeling his warmth, his strength, anchoring me. When he turned to face the assembly, he kept our fingers intertwined, a statement no one could miss. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room, "carries my child, the heir to the northern kingdoms. She has been under my protection for weeks, and she will remain under my protection for all the days to come." The throne room erupted, gasps, shouts, a few voices raised in immediate protest. I stood frozen, my hand locked in Demon's, while chaos bloomed around us. Through the noise, I heard Alpha Garrett's voice boom out. "Your Majesty, surely you don't mean... She's human! A servant! This is madness!" "This is my choice." Demon's voice cut through the uproar like thunder. "And I will not tolerate anyone, ally or enemy, who questions it. The child she carries is mine. That makes her untouchable. Anyone who harms her, who speaks against her, who plots against her in any way, will answer to me personally." The threat hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Several nobles stepped back, recognizing the danger in challenging an Alpha King's claim, but not everyone was deterred. "What of your duty to the kingdom?" Lord Thaddeus, an elderly counselor, stepped forward. "The Silverwood Alliance can be secured through other means." Demon's hand tightened on mine. "I will not sacrifice my child's legitimacy for political convenience." "Then legitimize the child without elevating the mother," Duchess Marina suggested, her tone poisonously sweet. "Acknowledge your heir, provide for them appropriately, but marry where the kingdom needs you to marry. It's not unprecedented." I felt Demon go rigid beside me, and suddenly I understood the trap. They were offering him a compromise. Acknowledge the baby, secure the succession, but discard me. Marry Celeste or another suitable noble. Relegate me to the shadows as a kept woman whose only value was the child I'd birthed. It was a reasonable solution from a political standpoint. It would solve so many problems. My heart cracked, waiting for his response. No. The word was absolute, final. Demon turned to look at me, and what I saw in his eyes stole my breath. "Ilara is not negotiable. Our child deserves both parents. More than that." He paused, his thumb stroking across my knuckles. "She deserves to be honored, not hidden. Respected, not relegated." "You would choose a human servant over centuries of tradition?" Alpha Garrett's voice was incredulous. "I would choose my family over your narrow definitions of tradition." Demon's gaze swept the room, daring anyone else to challenge him. "This is not a debate. This is a declaration. Ilara will be given a title, lands, resources appropriate to her station as the mother of my heir. Anyone who cannot accept that is free to leave my court." The silence that followed was different, shocked, resistant, but unable to find solid ground for argument. An Alpha King's word was law. They could disapprove, could plot and scheme, but openly defying him would mean war. It was Lady Iris who broke the stalemate, her voice calm and authoritative. "Perhaps we should discuss the practical details in a more private setting, Your Majesty. The court has had quite enough drama for one morning." Demon nodded slowly, never releasing my hand. "Council members remain. Everyone else is dismissed." The throne room began to empty, though the whispers intensified. I caught sight of Celeste as she passed, her beautiful face twisted with humiliation and rage, her father's hand gripping her arm tightly. She looked at me with such venom that I instinctively stepped closer to Demon. "She'll hate me forever," I murmured once we were alone with just the inner council. "She'll get over it," Demon said flatly. "Or she won't. Either way, it's not your concern." But as the heavy doors closed and I faced the council members who would decide my fate, I knew with crushing certainty that Celeste Silverwood's hatred was very much my concern. I'd just made a powerful enemy, and she would be far from the last. Lady Iris caught my eye, giving me the smallest nod of approval. I'd survived the first public test. But we both knew the real battles were just beginning. The council meeting lasted hours. Discussions of titles, property, financial arrangements, all the practical machinery needed to transform a servant into something the court couldn't dismiss. I participated where I could, my voice growing steadier as the shock wore off. These people might not respect me yet, but they would respect the king's will, and through it, my position. When it finally ended, Demon dismissed everyone except Owen. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he said against my hair. "I wanted to give you more time, but they forced my hand. I know." I wrapped my arms around his waist, drawing strength from his presence. "What happens now? Now we move you to the family wing. We make this official in every way that matters." He pulled back enough to look at me, his expression fierce. "And we prepare for the fight, because this isn't over, not by a long shot." He was right. As Owen escorted me to my new quarters, rooms that adjoined Demon's own, a statement of intimacy and protection, I could feel the castle shifting around me. Alliances forming, plots thickening, enemies circling. But when I lay down that night in a bed 10 times more comfortable than anything I'd ever known, feeling the flutter of life in my belly and the phantom warmth of Demon's arms around me, I felt something I'd never expected. Hope. Fragile and frightening, but real nonetheless. I'd survived my first battle, and somehow, impossibly, I wasn't facing the next ones alone. Winter arrived early that year, wrapping the castle in snow and silence. 3 months had passed since that explosive court assembly, and the kingdom had settled into an uneasy acceptance of my new reality. I was now officially Lady Alara of Thornmere, a title attached to a small but prosperous territory that provided income and legitimacy. The baby growing inside me was acknowledged as heir, and I'd been given every resource needed to prepare for motherhood and my impossible role. But acceptance didn't mean approval. The court remained divided. Some nobles, particularly the older generation who remembered Queen Adrian's humble origins, treated me with cautious respect. Others made their disdain clear through subtle slights, invitations accidentally, not extended, conversations that died when I entered rooms, eyes that looked through me as though I were still invisible. Celeste Silverwood had departed weeks ago with her father, but not before making her position abundantly clear. She'd cornered me in the library one afternoon, her beautiful face cold with fury. "You think you've won," she'd said, her voice low and venomous. "You think carrying his bastard makes you special, but you're just a phase, a moment of weakness when he realizes what he sacrificed for you. Alliances, respect, the kingdom's stability. He'll resent you, and your child will grow up knowing they destroyed their father's legacy." The words had haunted me for days, echoing through my mind during the sleepless nights when my growing belly made comfort impossible and my fears ran wild. But Demon noticed. He always noticed. "She's wrong," he'd said that night. His hand spread protectively across my stomach where the baby kicked actively now. "You haven't destroyed anything. You've given me something I thought I'd never have. A family that's mine by choice, not political arrangement. Your council still thinks you should marry." I'd whispered. "Lady Iris told me they're pressuring you to make the alliance with Silverwood despite everything. The council can think whatever they want." His voice had been steel wrapped in warmth. "I've made my position clear. This child is my heir. You are under my protection. That's not changing." But I'd heard the exhaustion beneath his words, seen the new lines around his eyes. Every choice he made to protect me came with a cost. Strained alliances, whispered doubts about his judgment, challenges to his authority that required constant vigilance. I was 7 months pregnant when the real test came. It started with a seemingly minor incident. A trade caravan attacked on the eastern border. Several merchants killed, goods stolen. Such raids happened occasionally, usually blamed on rogues or bandits. But Owen brought different news when he visited my chambers that morning. "The attackers were Silverwood wolves," he said grimly, keeping his voice low despite Helena and Mara's absence. We found their scent markers, territorial claims carved into trees. Alpha Garrett is making a move. My blood ran cold. Why? The alliance was strained, but we haven't done anything to provoke. Your existence provokes him. Owen's expression was grave. He sees the king's protection of you as weakness, evidence that Demon puts personal desire above kingdom needs. He's testing whether other packs will stand with the king or see an opportunity to redistribute power. What will Demon do? What he has to do. Respond with strength. He's gathering warriors now, preparing to ride to the border. Owen hesitated, then added, he wanted me to increase your guard. 4 sentinels instead of 2, rotating shifts. No one in or out without explicit clearance. Fear clawed at my throat. He thinks they'll come for me. He thinks Garrett is looking for leverage. And you, Lady Alara, are currently the king's greatest vulnerability. The words stung because they were true. I'd become exactly what I'd feared, a weakness that could be exploited, a liability in royal clothing. Demon found me hours later, standing at the window watching snow fall over the gardens. I heard him enter, but didn't turn. My arms wrapped protectively around my swollen belly. You're thinking too much, he said softly, coming to stand behind me. His hand settled on my shoulders, warm and grounding. I can feel it from across the castle. Owen told me about the Silverwood attacks. My voice was steadier than I felt. You're riding out. I have to. His breath stirred my hair. If I don't respond decisively, every pack with ambitions will test me. The kingdom will fracture. Because of me. Because of ambitious fools who think they can challenge my authority. He turned me to face him, his hands framing my face with infinite gentleness. This isn't your fault, Alara. Garrett was always going to make a move. Your presence just gave him an excuse he found convenient. But if you'd married Celeste, then I'd be trapped in a political arrangement with a man willing to murder merchants to make a point about power. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. I don't regret choosing you, not for a second. Do you understand that? I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love, or whatever this fierce thing between us had become, was worth the cost. But doubt was a persistent poison, and pregnancy hormones made everything sharper, more overwhelming. I'm scared, I admitted, of what might happen to you, to our baby, to the kingdom because I exist in it. Then be scared with me. He pulled me against his chest, careful of my belly between us, because I'm terrified too, terrified of losing you, of failing to protect our child, of making the wrong choice in the coming fight. His arms tightened fractionally. But we face it together. That's what family means. I let myself sink into his embrace, breathing in his scent, memorizing the feeling of safety, even as I knew he'd be riding into danger soon. When do you leave? Dawn. I'll take 50 warriors, enough to make a statement without leaving the castle vulnerable. He pressed his lips to my forehead. Lady Iris will oversee things here. Owen will remain as your personal guard. And I'll come back to you. I promise. It was a promise he couldn't guarantee, and we both knew it. But I nodded anyway, clinging to hope the way a drowning person clings to driftwood. That night, Demon stayed in my rooms. We didn't make love. My pregnancy made that complicated, and the weight of tomorrow pressed too heavily. Instead, we lay together in the firelight, his hand resting on my stomach where the baby moved restlessly, as though sensing the tension. Have you thought about names? He asked quietly. A few, but I wanted to wait, to choose together. Tell me. So I did, sharing the names I'd written in a private journal during long afternoons. We debated meanings and sounds, laughing softly at some of the more ridiculous noble names tradition suggested. For a few precious hours, we were just 2 people preparing to become parents, the politics and danger held at bay by intimacy and hope. Whatever happens, Demon said as dawn approached, our child will know they were wanted, loved, worth every sacrifice. He kissed my forehead, then my belly. I'm fighting for you both. Remember that. Then he was gone, leaving me with guards and handmaids, and an emptiness that felt like a physical wound. The days that followed were agony. News came in fragments. Demon had reached the border. There'd been a confrontation. The Silverwood forces had retreated, but Alpha Garrett was demanding formal negotiations. Lady Iris kept me informed but frustrated, clearly wanting to say more than political discretion allowed. "The king is holding firm," she said one evening, her expression troubled. "But Garrett has more support than we anticipated. Several minor pacts are using this as an opportunity to renegotiate their alliances. The kingdom is more unstable than it's been in decades. Because of me," I said dully. "Because of them," she corrected sharply. "Because power-hungry fools see a moment of transition and think they can exploit it. You didn't create this situation, Ilara. You're just the excuse they're using, but excuses had consequences. And I was living with them. I was alone in my chambers when the pain started. Sudden, sharp, too early. Helena found me doubled over, water pooling at my feet, terror clawing at my throat. "The baby," I gasped. "It's too soon. It's 2 months too soon. Breathe," Helena commanded, already moving into action. "Mara, fetch the healers, now." She guided me to the bed, her hand steady even though I could see fear in her eyes. "You're strong, Ilara. The baby is strong. We'll get through this." The next hours were a blur of pain and panic. The healers came. Wolf-born women with generations of knowledge in their blood. They examined me with efficient hands, their expressions carefully neutral in a way that terrified me more than panic would have. "The baby is coming," the eldest healer said finally. "We can't stop it. But it's early. Very early for a half-human child. We don't know." She didn't need to finish. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Half-wolf children were rare, unpredictable. Born too early, the baby might not survive. And if the baby died, I would lose the only thing anchoring my place in this world. "Send word to the king," I managed between contractions. "Please." "Already done," Owen said from the doorway, his face pale. "Ryder's left an hour ago, but he's 3 days' journey away and the baby won't wait." So I faced it alone. The pain, the fear, the knowledge that I might lose everything in the next few hours. The healers worked with quiet competence, but I saw their worried glances, heard their whispered concerns. The labor progressed too quickly, the baby too small, complications they couldn't quite name. "Push," they commanded, and I did, screaming my fear and fury into the winter darkness. And then, impossibly, miraculously, a cry. Thin and weak but unmistakably alive. "A boy," the healer said, her voice thick with relief and wonder, small but breathing. Fighting. They placed him on my chest, tiny and red and perfect, with a cap of dark hair and amber eyes that already held flecks of gold. Wolf eyes. He was so small I was afraid to hold him too tightly, afraid he might break beneath the weight of my hope. "Hello?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Hello, little one. I'm your mother. And your father is the bravest, strongest man in the kingdom. He's going to love you so much." The baby made a small sound, his tiny hand closing around my finger with surprising strength. And in that moment, all the fear and doubt and political complications faded into insignificance. This was what mattered. This small life, this perfect combination of two people who'd found each other in darkness and created something bright. Helena was crying openly now. "He's beautiful, my lady. Absolutely beautiful." Owen cleared his throat roughly. "I'll send word to the king. He needs to know his son arrived." The healers worked around us, monitoring the baby's breathing, wrapping him in soft blankets, murmuring reassurances about his size and strength. They wanted to take him to the nursery, to keep him warm and monitored, but I couldn't let go. Not yet. Not until Demon could see what we'd made together. He arrived 2 days later, having ridden through the night the moment he received word. I heard the commotion in the corridor, running footsteps, urgent voices. Then the door burst open and he was there, looking wild and desperate, still in his travel-stained clothes with snow melting in his hair. His eyes found mine first, scanning me for injury, relief flooding his face when he saw I was alive and whole. Then his gaze dropped to the bundle in my arms, and his expression transformed into something I'd never seen before, pure, overwhelming love. "He's here," I said softly. "Your son. He came early, but he's strong. So strong, Demon." He crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to his knees beside the bed. His hands trembled as they reached for the baby, and I carefully transferred our son into his father's arms. Demon held him like he was made of glass and starlight, staring down at the tiny face with wonder written across every feature. "He has your eyes," I whispered. "And your nose." Demon's voice cracked. "And your courage. Coming into this world fighting, refusing to wait for permission or perfect timing." He looked up at me, and there were tears on his face. "Thank you. For this. For him. For staying even when it would have been easier to run." "I couldn't run," I said simply. "Not from you. Not from this." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine with the baby cradled between us. A family. Small and imperfect and absolutely real. "I settled things at the border," he said quietly. "Garrett backed down when 3 other packs sided with me. He's still angry, but he knows pushing further means war he can't win. Because of the baby? Because of you." Demon pulled back enough to look at me properly. "You were right to fear what your presence would provoke. But you were wrong about the outcome. Seeing me stand firm, refuse to compromise on family, it showed strength, not weakness. The packs that matter respect that. They remember that power without honor is just tyranny." The baby made a small sound, and Demon smiled. A real smile, unguarded and full of joy. "What should we name him?" We'd discussed names before, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at our son with his dark hair and determined little face, I knew. "Adrian," I said. "After your mother. Let him carry her strength and her heart." "Adrian," Demon repeated, testing the name. "Perfect." He looked at our son with fierce protectiveness. "You're going to change everything, little one." "You already have." And he was right. Over the weeks that followed, as Adrian grew stronger and the court gradually accepted that this tiny half-human child was indeed their future king, I watched the kingdom shift. Not everyone approved. There would always be those who clung to old prejudices, but enough did. Enough saw that love and strength could coexist, that family was worth fighting for, that tradition could evolve without breaking. Lady Iris visited often, teaching me not just how to survive court, but how to shape it. Helena and Mara became true friends, rather than just attendants. Owen appointed himself Adrian's unofficial godfather, his stern warrior facade cracking every time he held the baby. And Demon, he was transformed. Still the alpha king in public, still commanding and strategic. But in private, he was simply Adrian's father, my partner, a man who'd chosen love over convenience and somehow made it work. 6 months after Adrian's birth, Demon made a formal announcement to the assembled court. He stood at the throne with me beside him, our son in my arms, and declared his intention to make our union official in every way. Not a political marriage, but a bonding ceremony, the sacred rite that wolves use to pledge themselves completely to a mate. "Lady Alara has proven herself in every way that matters," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. "She's borne my heir, stood firm against opposition, and shown more courage than most warriors I've known. She is my choice, my partner, and soon, my bonded mate." The court erupted, some in approval, others in shock, a few in barely concealed fury, but Demon silenced them all with a look, his hand finding mine and holding firm. "Anyone who cannot accept this is free to leave," he said simply. "But understand, this is not a debate. This is the future of our kingdom. We evolve, or we die, clinging to the past." The ceremony took place under the full moon, in the ancient ritual grounds where generations of wolves had bonded before us. It should have been impossible. Humans couldn't bond with wolves, everyone knew that. But when the pack elder drew the ceremonial blade and pressed our joined palms together, mixing our blood while Adrian slept in Helena's arms nearby, I felt something shift inside me. Not transformation. I would never be wolf-born, never shift or run with the pack. But connection. A thread that tied me to Demon in ways that transcended species or tradition. I felt his heartbeat as though it were my own. Felt the depth of his love and commitment washing over me like a wave. "You're mine," he murmured against my lips as the pack howled their approval into the night. "And I'm yours. For all the days we have, I echoed. and meant it with every fiber of my being. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges, political complications, people who would never fully accept me. But standing there under the moon with my bonded mate beside me and our son sleeping peacefully nearby, I felt something I'd never expected to feel again. I felt like I belonged. Not because of a title or a ceremony or even the child we'd created, but because I'd found a place where my courage mattered, where my love was valued, where being human wasn't a weakness, but simply part of who I was. Adrian stirred in Helena's arms, making the small mewling sound that meant he was waking. Demon reached for him immediately, cradling our son with practiced ease, pressing a kiss to his dark hair. "Ready to see your future kingdom, little prince?" he murmured, and as we walked back to the castle together, Demon, Adrian, and me, surrounded by guards and well-wishers and the people who'd become our family, I realized that this was the ending I'd been searching for without knowing it. Not a fairy tale where everything was perfect, but something better, something real, a life built on choice and courage, where love was strong enough to weather storms and bend traditions, where a servant girl with pale hair and too much fear had somehow become a queen in everything but name. Adrian would grow up knowing his parents had fought for him, had chosen each other despite every obstacle, had proven that family was worth any cost. He would rule a kingdom that had learned, however reluctantly, that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a king could do was follow his heart. Years later, when Adrian asked how his parents met, I told him the truth. Not a sanitized version, but the real story. Messy and complicated and full of fear and hope in equal measure. "Your father could have chosen the easy path," I said, smoothing his dark hair while he sat curled against me. "But he chose us instead. He chose love. And that changed everything." "Because love is stronger than politics?" Adrian asked with the serious expression he'd inherited from Demon. "Because love makes us brave enough to fight for what matters." I kissed his forehead, breathing in the scent of him, pine and honey. Wolf and human mixed into something entirely unique, and you, my darling boy, are what matters most. Demon appeared in the doorway, older now but still commanding, still capable of stealing my breath with a single look. He crossed the room to join us, wrapping his arms around both of us with the possessive tenderness that had become his trademark. "Telling him stories again?" he asked, amusement warming his voice. "The true one," I confirmed. "Good." He met my eyes over Adrian's head, and I saw everything we'd been through reflected there. The fear, the fights, the impossible choices that had somehow led us here. Let him know that love is worth fighting for, that family is worth any sacrifice, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own path, even when everyone says it's impossible. Adrian fell asleep between us, safe and loved, and absolutely certain of his place in the world. And as Demon pulled me close, his heartbeat steady against mine through our bond, I finally understood what I'd been searching for all those years ago when I scrubbed floors and tried to remain invisible. I'd been searching for this, for home, for belonging, for love that saw past surfaces to the truth beneath. I'd been searching for someone who would look at me and see not a servant, or a liability, or a political complication, but simply a Lara, someone worth fighting for, someone worth choosing, again and again, no matter the cost. And in finding that, I'd found everything.